All right, can everybody hear me?
No.
No. MHS, class of 1924. Commencement held on a Thursday evening. Music was performed by the high school orchestra. The moral values of a high school education was given by Leo Reed. Reverend A.W. Sinden gave the invocation. They were the first group of seniors to graduate from the new high school. Their old school was a victim of fire on December 29, 1921. The class of 1924 had 64 graduates, 41 females and 23 males. In 1924, life expectancy for men was 58 years and for women 61. Blackened and broken and fallen, it is dearer than ever before, wrote Will Kundal. Erect what you may, Mr. Architect. Design as you wish, Mr. Artesian. Employ your greatest skill, Mr. Decorator. You will fail to reconstruct that loveliness, that dignity, that sentiment which for the past 45 years stood as sentinel on the hilltop, safeguarding the young of nearly 5 decades. The cruel flames that swallowed up the dear old high school struck sorrow to the heart and the very soul of hundreds who loved the old building and its countless treasures. And I understand that we were able to save this one. This is at the museum, right? The other museum?
Correct.
But we must console ourselves with the pleasant memories that will for generations linger around the old Academy Hill, quoted from the 1922 yearbook. The students who were seniors the year the school burned chose this design for their yearbook. You can see the smoke or flames. The building destroyed by fire was often called the Academy, a name it had inherited. Now the expression is a memory, and the high school has replaced the Academy in name as well as in fact. B.S. Moyle. Constructed of brick and concrete, the new high school stands proof against fire and other ordinary forces of destruction, and should stand longer than all its predecessors on what is probably the most beautiful school site in Iowa. The new school is fitted in every way to meet the needs of modern education. Perfect lighting, heating, and ventilation give ideal conditions for study and recitation. Science laboratories and auditorium give opportunities that our pupils have not had before. The arrangement of rooms and corridors make possible the organization of senior high school, junior high, and a grade school of the 3rd Ward in one building. And that was quoted from the 1924 yearbook. The Daily Times article, April 5th, 1924. Mrs. L. Riggs of Maquoketa, a pioneer resident, will present the high school with a flagpole to be erected on the campus. Her husband turned the first sod of prairie in Maquoketa, where the campus is located, when he was 12 years of age. 4 school buildings have stood on the ground. I didn't realize that, 4. And Mr. Riggs received his education in the first. School board members included M.J. Hoffman, President, M.O. Wright, C.H. Anderson, H.A. Joyner, and J.E. Goodnow. Alumni officers were Lester Romer, Grace Niddle, Helen Nitschke, and Frank Mitchell. The class will. To the freshies, we leave the trials and tribulations of entering the wrong classroom and being laughed at when found. To the sophomore, we leave the knowledge that knowing how to make spitballs is not a requirement of entrance to the domestic science class. To Superintendent Moyle, the class of 1924 wishes to leave a yardstick to be used to inspire awe throughout the school. Bud Spurgeon Moyle was named for 2 well-known preachers, his mother hoping he would follow suit. When he instead chose to become a teacher, he felt BS was more appropriate, not realizing what those initials would mean to students down the road. He served as superintendent for 16 years, from 1917 to 1934. After the fire, he was on the phone the next day with architects planning reconstruction. He arranged for classrooms and acquired textbooks and supplies by the end of the holiday break. Not a day of school was missed. In 1927, he organized the Maquoketa Junior College in that building, which operated for 16 years until it closed because of World War II. Principal James Robertson Halliburton was born in Missouri in 1892. He married Marie Harbert in 1925 in Des Moines. She had attended the University of Iowa and had been employed by Waverly High School. Their daughter, Mary Alice, was born and died on the same day as her birth in 1926. By 1930, J.R. was attending the University of Chicago, and by 1940, he had taken up farming. Rowing, not drifting. They are now looking forward to the time when they are safely launched on that immense and treacherous sea of life. Rowing, not drifting, and that was their motto. Each in their own way to help make Iowa, their state, one of peace, prosperity, and happiness. Esther M. Gallagher, Sr. Or was it pronounced Gallagher? Anybody know? Gallagher. Photo of class members when in elementary school. And you can see the one down below, it says Runt, and that nickname stuck with him. Declamatory, group contest held in February between Monmouth, Preston, and Maquoketa, with first place going to Maquoketa in the oratorical and dramatic classes. Their humorous speech, titled A Telephone Romance, received second place. Senior Laura Moore Foley took home first place on February 4th with his oratorical title, John Brown. Seniors Geraldine Orr and Bernice Molinoff received first on February 21st. Debate teams. 2024 debate team affirmative. Although disappointed that fortune denied them a chance at further debate after their loss to Monticello, Maquoketa's representatives looked hopefully forward to another year and said with Browning, "We are baffled to fight better." Shown are Willard Stewart, Roger's father, Eleanor Seeley, and Danny Burke. Now, while they were not seniors, they were on the debate team. And I believe they were all juniors. 2024 negative team, Irene Fairbrother, Florence Sutton, and Edith Schlegel. And again, those are probably juniors. In the middle, Florence, her brother Wilbur was a senior. And Florence was the mother of Bill and Jim Merrick. Big day, school opens in the new building. Football team making great plans on beating St. Mary's in the first game of the season. First football victory of the year. Maquoketa beats DeWitt 6-0. Thursday, October 10th, physics test. Oh, what a calamity. Wednesday, November 21st, Geraldine Orr is requested to wake up. Ruth Esty gets what she deserves, a trip to see Mr. Halliburton. Mr. Paxson requests Pat to leave the room. Debate, Maquoketa victorious. Exemption list posted, many long faces. Tuesday, February 12th, sophomores gift program in assembly in honor of Abraham Lincoln. Thursday, February 19th, the seniors worry about invitations. So here's a list of the courses of study. Now on the left side it's from 1893 and on the right 1921. I did not have a list for the class, for 1924, but I assume it didn't change, that much in 3 years' time. So in 1921, essays on English literature, civil government for Iowa and U.S., general histories, essays on rhetoric, they were no longer offered to students as they had been in the 1800s. The classes that were added were civics and American and modern history. No longer offered in 1921 were courses on German, bookkeeping, trigonometry, natural philosophy, plants analysis, topical essay, deportment, and natural philosophy. But the new classes offered were commercial course, agriculture, physics, physicology, mechanical drawing, normal and manual training, domestic science, public speaking, economics, advanced algebra, and vocational guidance. Junior Senior Girls Glee Club, one of the best and biggest musical organizations ever founded in Maquoketa High School. Boy Glee's Club, consisting of boys from all the classes. The band consisted of 14 members under the direction of Miss Karsten. School activities included French Club. 15 students met every 2 weeks at the homes of various members. In October, they enjoyed a delightful picnic at the caves. Home Economics Club. Organized with a membership of 30 on September 1923, meetings were held on Mondays twice a month. Programs covered such subjects as art applied to the home. Before Christmas, they learned how to enamel fancy boxes and hot dish mats. I wonder if we have any of those at the museum, any of those artifacts. Normal Training Club. Zella Griffin served as president. Literary. Books read by students included Honest Abe, Blushing Bride, and Barney Google. Miss Karsten read 1,000 Ways to Please a Husband. She was married later that year. Athletics. The football team. Now, they clearly didn't have the names in the right order, so I kind of changed it around a little bit, so I'm still not quite sure if it's right. But the back row, left to right, I just have last names. Stewart, again, that's Roger's dad. Stoll, some relation to Don. That would be your great-grandfather, maybe?
Probably.
Marlowe, and that would be Jack Marlowe's dad. James, Hildebrand, French, and Coach Cruikshank. The middle row, Crumbeatty, Fisher, Weedy, Hale, and Mitchell. Front row, Bowman, Robinson, Payne, Bolt, and Stoll. And I just don't think that's Stoll in the front row on the far right. I don't know, he doesn't really look like his brother. Weedy had been captain of both football and basketball teams. He missed but one game in 4 years. Senior Harry Weedy was the captain on the boys' basketball team. Alfred Stoll, guard, and Elroy Taylor was a substitute. Girls' basketball. Basketball training for the girls was reorganized that year. Senior forwards were Velma Cram and Devin Lott. Senior guard, Carol Giesler. Geraldine Orr played center position. So just 4 years before their graduation, women were given the right to vote. 4 years after was the first year that women were allowed to run long distance in the Olympic Games. In 1928, it was an exciting 800-meter race. After the race, several women fell to the ground in exhaustion. And although this happened to male athletes, critics said that this was proof that women shouldn't be running at all. The London Daily Mail quoted a doctor who said that such feats of endurance could make women old too soon. The president of the International Olympic Committee called for eliminating all women's sports from the Olympics. After that, women were banned from Olympic races longer than 200 meters for 32 years. And that's quoted from The Greatest Stories Never Told. Photos of junior and seniors in physical training class, a new class that was offered that year. Their activities included games and athletics, dancing, and gymnastics. This book of yells was once owned by Helen Stoddard. And some of those were the same yells that we had, in the 70s. Cupid at Vassar was one play the students performed in. 64 seniors graduated in 1924. Hazel Amy Applegate, future occupation listed, costume designer. And I think on these future occupations, that the yearbook staff came up with this. Hazel, born in Maquoketa, was the daughter of Charles Lee and Leona Hartman Applegate. She married Harold Davison in 1925. Their children were Harold Allen Davison, Evelyn Elaine Davison Cornelius, and Owen Earl Davison. In the 1950 census, she was helping on the farm and keeping house. Letha Mae Barkley, future occupation, hairdresser. Letha, born in Iron Hill, was the daughter of Lucius Henry and Susan Fisher Barkley. She married Gordon Bickford in 1925, and to this union, 7 children were born. The 1950 census shows she was a cook at a cafe and living in Maquoketa with her husband and children. Letha is buried in Canton in Jones County. Wilma Bernice Dice, future occupation, matron of an orphanage. Wilma, born in Jackson County, was the daughter of Christian and Fanny Gertrude Whitmore Beck. She married Ralph Kenneth Dice, and to this union, Betty Dice Bailey was born. Is that any relation to?
Yeah, my sister-in-law, Betty was.
Was your sister-in-law, okay. 1950 census shows Wilma as a farm helper keeping house. She is buried in Union Cemetery, Clinton. Alta Benton, future occupation, interior decorator. Alta, born in Maquoketa, was the daughter of William and Mary Ellen Allison Benton. Alta attended Cornell College, where she completed 4 years. On left is her college yearbook photo taken in 1930. 10 years after college, she was living at 406 West Pleasant Street, and that's near Carson's funeral home, with her mother, and may have been employed at the jail. In 1950, her occupation was listed as keeping house, where her mother also resided, so I think she took care of her mother, although her mother did outlive her by quite a few years. Alta had 2 older sisters. Blair Williams Bowling, future occupation, soldier of great fortune. Blair, born in Maquoketa, was the son of Isaac and Alice Eden Bowling. He married in 1934 and owned and operated Bowling Land and Cattle Company. The Bowlings had 5 children. Blair died a year before turning 100. The Bowlings are buried at Mount Calvary Cemetery in Sumner, Iowa. Carlisle Milton Bowling, future occupation, great author. Carlisle attended Culver Military Academy in Indiana. He moved to Sumner, Iowa in 1925 and later married Gertrude Marion McCormick. Their daughter was Sally Ann Hudson. Carlisle was associated with Bowling Land Cattle Company. Blair, shown in the last slide, was his brother. Carlisle is buried in Sumner. Mildred Marie Bowman, future occupation, mind reader. Mildred, born in Maquoketa, was the daughter of Gilbert and Anna Holstein Bowman. She married Claude Veers in 1937. And to this union, 2 children were born. After graduation, she worked for Iowa Electric, and in 1940 was a bookkeeper, and later a retail cosmetic salesperson, and then lastly, she was a teller for Jackson State Savings Bank until her retirement. Mildred is buried at Mount Hope. Eula Marie Burleson, future occupation, an old maid. Eula Marie, born in Clinton, was the daughter of Shadrach and Jessie Dow Burleson. By 1940, she had married Lester King Carey Sr. and was living in Illinois. They had 1 son. She had also lived in New York, and she is buried at Buckhorn. Velma Marie Cram, future occupation, toe dancer. Velma, born in Olin, was the daughter of Charles and Ida Graves Cram. She married Howard Daniel Crowley in 1927, and 4 children were born to this union. In 1940, she was living with her husband and children in Maquoketa. Mr. Crowley was a tax collector with the government. She is buried in Davenport. Esther Mae Gallagher, future occupation, a preacher's wife. Esther, born in Jackson County, was the daughter of John and Anna Cottrell Gallagher. She married Charles Kenneth Waite in 1950 and was a bookkeeper at a hardware store. Her husband worked for the state doing highway repair. They are buried in Mount Hope. Novella Duran, future occupation, milliner. Novella was born in Illinois in 1907, the daughter of William and Alma Jones Duran. She married John Oman Buck, and to this union a daughter was born. They lived in Minnesota. Anna Earls, future occupation, school teacher. Anna, born in Preston, was the daughter of Frank and Inger Scow Earls. She married Lester Edward Boots Moore, and 2 children were born to this union. Her daughter died at age 1. At age 22, Anna was a waitress at a restaurant, and her husband was a mechanic, and they were living in Clinton. She later married John Jack Wessels. Ruth Estee, and I think probably some of you knew her, future occupation, dietitian. Ruth was born in Delmer, the daughter of William and Mary Ann Kinraid Estee. She attended college and was married to Dr. Clay Risser. To this union, sons Robert and William were born. Earl Everson, future occupation, politician. Earl was the son of Ever and Croce Macaulay Everson and the husband of Pamela Maud Snell. When living in Montana, he was employed as a motion picture projectionist. Earl died in Orange County, California. John Lorimore, future occupation, lawyer. John was born in Baldwin, the son of Thomas and May Anna Foley, and is buried in San Diego County, California. He completed at least 3 years of college, and he worked as a salesman. He married Emma Elizabeth Kiefer sometime before 1937, and 2 children were born to this union. Harriet Bell Fowler, future occupation, settlement worker.
Teacher.
That was your teacher?
Is
that
my
what you said?
teacher. Harriet Fowler was my teacher.
Harriet was the daughter of Alan and Helen Richardson Fowler. In 1930, she was a teacher at a county school. Maybe that was your county school. And living at home with her sisters and parents. Harriet, I don't think she ever married, buried in Union Cemetery. Ida Mae French, future occupation, clerk. Ida Mae was the daughter of Harry and Nora Patterson French. She was married to Lloyd Scott. They were the parents of Jack and Nancy Scott Belmore. In 1950, she was living with her husband in Monmouth and was a bookkeeper at a farm equipment store. So what would the name of that equipment store? Anybody know what that would have been? No. Ollie Gibson. Future occupation, nurse. Ollie, born in Lost Nation, was the daughter of John and Olive Gibson. She married Clarence Keller, and to this union, Ronald and Caroline were born. At age 43, she was listed as unable to work. She passed away a year or two later and is buried in the Lost Nation Cemetery. Now, is that your aunt, Bonnie? Carol Giesler, future occupation, dweller in White House. Carol was the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Harold Giesler. She graduated from Purdue University with a class of 1928, where she was a member of Alpha, I don't know how to say that word, Chi, Alpha Chi Omega sorority. After graduation, she worked for an advertising agency. She married Lester Malcolm Cooley in 1931 in Indiana. Lester was employed by Cooley Gravel Company, and he was managing partner of the Edna Coal Company in Denver. 2 children were born to this union, Thomas and John. The family employed a maid. The Cooleys had lived in Montana, Missouri, and lastly, Denver, Colorado, where they died. Zella Beatrice Griffin, future occupation, beauty doctor. Zella, the daughter of Harry and Nora Nims Griffin, was born in Iowa. She became the wife of Harold Artemus Mitchell in 1944, and daughter Carolyn Sue was born to this union. She died the same day as her birth in 1945 in Michigan. Prior to her marriage, Zella had been teaching in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Dylan Hale, future occupation, oil dealer. Dylan was born in Maquoketa in 1907, the son of George and Jenny Heaster Hale. In 1940, he was a traveling salesman, living in Wisconsin. Dylan married Elizabeth Arvella Orton, and son Dylan was born to this union. They lived in Baldwin. Gladys Nancy Head was born in Jackson County, the daughter of Francis and Emmeline Merrick Head. Obituary read, Gladys Head married Christian Reimer in 1951 in Maquoketa. She had been a school teacher. Gladys was the daughter of Francis, I already said that. She was a sister to Walter Edward and Ines Ann. Mary Helen Henningsen, future occupation, dressmaker. Mary Helen, born in Maquoketa, was the daughter of Herman and Mary Hanson Henningsen. In 1940, she was living in Maquoketa. She is buried in Cedar Memorial Park, Cedar Rapids. Emil Hoffman, and he was the one in that first picture with, when they were in elementary school and had Runt. So he kept that nickname all the way through high school. His future occupation, a real estate agent. Emil, who did not marry, is buried in Des Moines. He suffered a heart attack while visiting friends. Emil was born in Maquoketa and lived in Des Moines for 32 years. He was assistant chief of the collection division in the IRS before retiring in 1967. Emil was the first president of the Federal Employees Credit Union and was a member of the National Association of Internal Revenue Employees. But that would have been a fun group, right? His sister, Grace of New York, survived him. He was born in Maquoketa, the son of Emil August and Rosa Julius Hoffman. Leonard J. Hute, future occupation, manager of a poultry farm. Leonard was born in Jackson County to Walter and Laura Streets Hute. In 1940, he was a switchboard operator, and in 1950, a power supervisor. He married Delpha Butterfield, and to this union, son Randall and daughter Janice were born. Leonard is buried in Chicago. Leo Jessen, I remember him. Future occupation, banker. Leo was born in Maquoketa, the son of Hans Peter and Geneva Miller Jessen. Leo married Leona Elizabeth Miller, a rural school teacher, in 1939, and to this union, Robert Lee and Mary Lou were born. In 1950, he was working as an auto mechanic for Joe Martin. Leo is buried in the Sacred Heart Cemetery. Camilla Johnson, future occupation, Society Belle. Camilla married J. Lewis Campbell in 1926 and was widowed 4 years later. She later married Jacob W. J. Schneider, and daughter Sandy was born to this union. Camilla was born in Iron Hill, the daughter of Claude and Elizabeth Wood Johnson. Emma Kerr. Now she has an unusual hairstyle, compared to the other women. Future occupation, novelist. Emma Lamina Kerr was born in Onslow, the daughter of Edward and Margaret Ralston Kerr. She married Erwin Gerhard Hersman in 1927. They had 3 girls and 3 boys while living in Fairfield, Iowa. Jenny Bell Ketchum, future occupation, pharmacist. Jenny was the daughter of Frank and Mary Johnson Ketchum, who married Edward Floyd Ed Benishek in 1933. 3 years later, after Edward died, she married widower George Edward Binns, and they lived in Farmers Creek Township. Merrill Matthew Copas, future occupation, printer. And look at his nickname, it says Adeline. Merrill, born in Iowa, was the son of Nicholas and Alice Durham Copas. He lived in Dubuque, and guess what? He was a printer. Merrill married Marie and had daughter Sandra Sue Copas Burke. He's buried in Mount Calvary Cemetery. Hugo Wilbur Cruz, future occupation, cartoonist. Hugo was born in Miles to Henry and Mary Pryor Cruz. He was a salesman in Texas, and in 1940, he was living in Illinois. He married Ione Thompson, and she wore a black crepe suit for her wedding dress. I don't know if that was kind of the style. I just had never heard that before. They were the parents of Judah. Hugo was buried in Mount Hope. Donald, I don't know how to say that last name. Is it Label or Libel? Label? Future occupation, discoverer of the North Pole. Donald was born in Zwingle to George and Jeannie Drenning Label. He traveled north to Canada at age 22. Not sure. He continued on, made it to the North Pole. Donald moved to Dubuque and by age 45 was working as a salesman, and he's buried in Zwingle. Vivian M. Littlefield, future occupation, raise Angora cats. Vivian was born in Jackson County, the daughter of Lori and Nellie Buchanan Littlefield. She married George Circlebach in 1932. She died at age 27 in childbirth. The baby George Jr. survived. Vivian, the younger sister of Ruth Littlefield, is buried in Andrews Cemetery. Naomi Dorothy Devine Lott. Future occupation, missionary worker. Naomi, born in Davenport, was the daughter of Thomas and Elsie Tracy Lott, nicknamed Dee. By 1940, she had married Henry Russell Stansberry and was living in Maryland. She died in Florida. Alice Lovin, future occupation, great cook. Alice Lovin was born in Monmouth. She was the daughter of Jenny Sandhouse and Benjamin Franklin Lovin. She completed 4 years of college and was living in Los Angeles, employed as a stenographer, and later was a secretary while single. She married John Fellows, who died in 1963. And according to what John Lovin had written, this was his aunt for the Jackson County History book, it said, as of 1991, she was residing in Sun City, Arizona, the only one of that generation that was still living. Bernice Margaret Wilhelmina Molinoff. Future occupation, French teacher. Bernice was born in Andrew to Johannes, John Henry, and Joanna Tebben Molinoff. In 1940, she was single and teaching in New York. Her name appears in the 1957 Manhattan phone directory. Ralph Woods Mitchell, future occupation, minister. In 1940, Ralph was living and working on a farm in Maquoketa with his parents and sister. By 1950, it says he was the owner-operator of the Grist Mill feed store, so that would be Mitchell Mastery, right? Most likely. And living with his parents. Ralph was born in Maquoketa, the son of George and Ethel Woods Mitchell, and is buried in Esgate. Frank Alexander McDonald, future occupation, scientist. Frank was born in Andrew, the son of Alexander and Daisy Small McDonald. He married Eleanor Becker in 1931 and adopted son Gary Don McDonald. He was also married to Maxine Audrey Kellogg. Frank served in World War II from 1941 to 1945. He was stationed with the U.S. Army in Europe and Africa. Frank was employed by the FMC Corporation Crane and Excavator Division for 25 years. He was buried in Cedar Rapids a year later after his retirement. Era M. Bowman, future occupation, a Follies girl. Era, who was born in Iowa, was the daughter of Bissell J. and Lulu Carty McDonald. By 1940, Era was living in Chicago. She was the wife of Milton L. Bowman. Era is buried in Mount Hope. Miss Era McDonald sustained a severe scalp wound. The car in which she was riding, driven by Milton Bowman, crashed into a tree near Fulton. It required 40 stitches to close the wound. Did anyone know her? I just wondered where. Geraldine Orr. Now this is Bonnie, this is your grandma. Grandma? No.
Some kind of aunt.
Some kind of
That's
an
right.
aunt. An aunt. Okay. Future,
Rogers too.
okay. And Roger's aunt too. Future occupation, farmer's wife.
I am.
Geraldine Orr was born near Maquoketa, the daughter of Thomas and Minnie Schultz Orr. She married Clarence Doc Romer in 1924, and they farmed for many years in the Maquoketa, Fulton, and Andrew areas. They were the parents of Lee Allen Romer and Gloria G. Romer. Years after Doc had passed, Jerry married Thane R. Merrill, Sr. Cases in the hospital. Seldom knows to be awake when called upon. In economics, she leaves her ability as a sleeper to any freshman who needs it. Eleanor Pangborn, future occupation, President's Secretary. Eleanor was united in marriage to Stanley Quay Nims in 1923. They had returned from their home in Chicago to spend the 4th of July with her parents. She died July 5th. Death certificate stated it was a premature birth following an automobile trip, but the newspaper account said she had heart failure. Floyd Raymond, future occupation, cowboy. Floyd was born in Bellevue, the son of Lauren and Myrtle Campbell Patterson. He married Mrs. Genevieve Edna Desmore Toe Patterson in 1941, and 2 children were born to this union. They lived on Water Street in Bellevue, and he owned a paper decoration business, and he was also a painter. He died in Oregon, but he is buried in Bellevue. Isabel Penn, future occupation, spiritualist. Isabel was the daughter of Charles and Elsie Garrett Penn, was born in Colfax, Iowa. She married Ford Albert Hayner in 1926, and they lived in Beloit, Wisconsin, and later Maquoketa. She was widowed at age 43. Isabel then lived in Davenport with her mother and owned a donut shop. And she was working at her donut shop 80 hours a week. Nadine Vivian Pierce, future occupation, candy maker. Nadine was born in Jackson County to Clifton and Elsie Pierce. She married Marvin Schnorr in 1946 in Nashua and taught school in Iron Hill and Maquoketa First Ward. She is buried in Mount Hope. Mildred Elizabeth Prindle, future occupation, rattle box manufacturer. Mildred was the adopted daughter of William and Minnie Babcock Prindle. She married Donald K. Wiesmer, and to this union Charles was born. They lived in Van Buren Township. By 1940, Mildred was widowed and living with her son in Washington, D.C. She was working as a housekeeper at a hospital. Myrtle Prusia, future occupation, run a Western ranch. Myrtle was the daughter of Azariah Caleb and Laura Charlotte Niles Prusia. She married Wilbur Sutton in 1926, and he died a year later. She married Oscar Theodore Ted Rudd in 1930. They were the parents of Robert Theodore. Later, she lived in Chicago, and she's buried in Illinois. Photos shown of Mildred with her first husband, Wilbur Sutton. Robert Nicholas Ralston, future occupation, salesman. His essay on what Iowa means to me was chosen as one of the 3 best in Maquoketa during the Iowa Historical Essay Contest. Robert was a bookkeeper in the insurance industry in Los Angeles and later employed as a contractor. He was a licensed practical nurse at the Jackson County Public Hospital. Robert married Claire Ellen Johnson, and they had 2 children. Later married Lita Alma Hamlet. He's buried with his second wife in Penn Cemetery. He was born in Maquoketa, the son of John King Ralston and Margaret Reisling Ralston. Leo Corning Reeve, future occupation, radio manufacturer. Leo worked in Davenport as a civil engineer for the government. He was married to Helen Mae Franks, and they had 3 children. Leo was buried in Quincy, Illinois. Born in Maquoketa, the son of William and Sarah Seward Reeve. It's a kind of a sad thing here in his family. His 2 half-sisters drowned in 1901 in the Maquoketa River about 2 miles above the dam. Bessie, age 21, and Hazel, age 16. Hazel was back visiting. She had been living with her aunt in Savannah. And so the people that found them, they found an overturned boat and saw 2 hats floating by the boat. And the newspaper headline, "Shocking Calamity, 2 sisters drowned, clasped in each other's arms." It's believed that they went down together as they no doubt grasped each other in their drowning struggles. Laura Jane Reynolds, future occupation, dentist. Laura taught school in Fulton, Iowa, and was living in Grand Mound by 1940. She was the wife of Carl Oscar Jensen, and they had 2 sons, Reynolds and Jack. She was born in Maquoketa, Charles and Belle Coleman Reynolds. She taught school in Fulton and then in Miles and Olin area before moving to Maquoketa and teaching for 35 years. L. Vosper Roberts, future occupation, Ford repairer. Vosper, the son of Anthony and Ada Burleson Roberts, was born in Delmer. He married Mildred Lorraine Long, and to this union 2 children were born. Vosper is buried in Buckhorn Cemetery. Kermit Palmer Rogers, future occupation, photographer. Kermit was the son of Harry and Viola M. Patterson Rogers, born in Henry County, Iowa. In 1930, he was living in the hospital for the insane at Independence. And in 1940, was a patient at the Independence Hospital in Washington, Iowa. Kermit was buried in Andrew at the graveyard across from the Jackson County farm. Kermit lived and worked on the Jackson County farm from the age of 15 until his death. Okay, so we have Grace May Segers and her granddaughter, Barb Bowman, is here today. Future occupation, movie actress. Grace was the daughter of Frank and Ida Clark Segers. She was born in Maquoketa. Grace was the wife of Elmer Clarence Miller. She was a school teacher and farmed with her husband for over 40 years in the Iron Hill area. They had 5 children. And Barb's mother was one of those. Vera Leona Segers, future occupation, physical instructor. Vera was married to Carl Payne, and they were the parents of Frank and Carl. Her husband was a private in the U.S. Army. Vera's employment included sales lady and clerk in a retail shoe store. She was the daughter of Frank and Jessie Bowling Sagers. So I was wondering, would she have had a connection with Sagers Shoe Store, or was that much later? Do you know? Inez Alvina Schumann, future occupation, a bride-to-be. Inez married William Verl Davison. She and William lived in Perry Township. After William's death, she married Joseph A. Thies. Inez is buried in Mount Hope with her first husband. She was the daughter of Carlisle and Alvina Moeller Schumann. Nels Emil Scott, and I bet a lot of you know Nels, right? It's pretty well known. Future occupation, grocer. Nels first married Rosa Ehlers in 1926. Daughter Lola Rosa Scott was born a year later. A few years later, his wife died. He then married Elizabeth, and they had 2 children, Arlene Helen Scott Nolting and Verda Scott. They farmed in Bloomfield Township. Nels was the son of Paul and Magdalena Hoy Scott. Ruth Emily Sinden, future occupation, famous musician. Ruth was teaching music at the State Teachers College in 1927 and married Nilo Wellington Hovey that same year. They were the parents of Marjorie Ann, Hovey Edgar, and Lois, and they lived in Maquoketa. Ruth was the daughter of Archibald and Isabel Welch Sinden. She is buried in Indiana. George Emil Stoll, future occupation, aviator. George was first a farm laborer when living with his parents. He married Opal Russell in 1933 and farmed in South Fork. George was born in Jackson County, the son of Anthony and Viola Scherberger Stoll. He had 3 brothers and 1 sister. Wilbur Sutton, future occupation, clothing dealer. Wilbur was the son of George and Esther Morse Sutton and was born in Farmers Creek Township, where he lived as a child. He married his classmate Mildred Pruja and died a year later from pulmonary TB. Elroy E. Taylor, future occupation, detective. Elroy was the son of John E. and Mabel Beaver Taylor. He married Metta Thede before 1930. Elroy was a mechanic in Maquoketa and later a machinist in Davenport. June A. Taylor, future occupation, jeweler. June was born in Maquoketa to Riley and Pearl Nims Taylor. She married Percy A. Warren in Michigan in 1927, and they were the parents of a son and daughter. She later lived in Michigan, and they may have stayed there until her death. Harry Weedy, future occupation, football coach. Harry Weedy was the adopted son of Wolf Henry and Augusta Marson Weedy. So he had a pretty sad life. He had suffered a lot of losses. He was just 7 years old when his father died. And 2 years later, his mother married Nicholas Greger. And then his sister died. And then when he was 19, his mother died. He married Edith Palmer, and son Harold Lee was born to this union. I remember Harry Weedy. Does anybody know Harry Weedy? He was just the nicest man. I mean,
Isn't he the one that was left as a baby in a basket on the stairs of the Designs Church?
I wonder.
And then he was adopted?
I wonder.
They found him in a basket, just
They
a
found
tiny
him in a
baby.
basket because his sister was
I think
like
that was him.
12 or 14 years older. So Harry's obituary states he was employed at Clinton Engines, Scale Gas, and lastly, he was a custodian at the hospital here in Maquoketa. And this is Harry's high school diploma. But yeah, he was just a really kind, gentle man, and just... Gertrude M. Wheats, future occupation, housekeeper. Gertrude, the daughter of William and Mary Ann Beck Wheats, was born in Jackson County. She was the youngest of her siblings, which included 2 sisters and 3 brothers. Gertrude married William Hillary Mudd in 1927 in Cedar Rapids and were the parents of William. After their marriage, they lived in Tama. She was a stenographer. Later, they moved back to Maquoketa. And when I saw this ad, I don't know, I saw it like last year. I was looking through for some other stuff, and it just made me smile. Okay, so he's in the cleaning business, and his last name is Mud. And I just thought that was hilarious. But her husband owned then this cleaning business. And maybe that's why he never changed it to Mud Cleaners. Maybe he stuck with the other one. Yeah. Zelma Margaret Wilson. We're getting closer to the W's. Future occupation, librarian. Zelma, the daughter of John and Olga Hunter Wilson, was born in Maquoketa, and the wife of Oliver Jacob Bowman. They were the parents of A. Dean Bowman and Anna Mae Bowman Dellinger. Zelma is buried in Buckhorn. Marjorie Woods, future occupation, manager of the 10-cent store. Marjorie was born in Maquoketa, the daughter of Clinton Columbus Wood and Gertrude Hurst Woods. Her parents married at the bride's home in Hurstville. Her grandparents were William Kendall Hurst and Augusta Kewell Hurst. At age 20, Marjorie married Albert S. Hedstrom in Davenport, and they were the parents of Richard. They lived in Cook County, Illinois. She was a sister to Leonard Woods. 3 Maquoketa young people were awarded honor certificates for having a perfect attendance record during the past 10 years of their schooling. Now I wonder with this fire, if they hadn't gotten the school back together after Christmas vacation, would they have like not gotten their certificate? Robert Ralston, Laura Reynolds, and Olive Gibson received the certificates. Miss Reynolds was one of 2 high school pupils out of 1,300 chosen to meet President Warren G. Harding when he visited Chicago. High school staff included mathematics teacher Mary Joyner, Mary G. Hancock, who taught penmanship and literature, agriculture and general science taught by W.H. Cruikshank, Alta Anderson taught normal training and Latin classes. Her father was a treasurer of Jackson County. History teacher Lucille Talbot. Elizabeth Longeran taught the commercial course. In 1968, she was honored for 46 years as commercial teacher. The class of 1968 dedicated their yearbook to her, and I do have that up here if anybody wants to look at it. And I also have the high school yearbooks for 23 and 24, I believe. Language teacher Ruth E. Shepard taught English and French. Music and drawing were taught by Catherine Karsten. Esther M. Kidder, home economics. Manual training, Byron Phillips. English and public speaking, Mildred Walker. English teacher Ruth I. Pierce. Physics and algebra were taught by Philip Paxson. And pictured are the talk staff. Now this class got together for many reunions. They were there in 38 for the centennial. And they had their 50-year class reunion in 1974. And there's the rest of them. And Barb, your grandma is, do you see her?
Middle front.
Middle front.
Flowered shirt in front.
Harriet Fowler arrived too late to be included in her picture. Mrs. Gertrude Wheats Mudd served as mistress of ceremonies. 3 teachers of the class of 1924 were also present. Alta Anderson Bailey of Maquoketa, who taught Latin, algebra, and biology. Catherine Karsten Full of Bettendorf, music and drawing. Wallace Cruikshank, one-time principal, football coach, agriculture, and science teacher. And they had a 60-year class reunion in 1984 at the Rendezvous. And 18 of the 64 classmates were present. Rowing, not drifting, that was the motto. Actually, look at it, I didn't run over. Okay, so I want to see a show of hands of how many people knew one person in this class, or more, Okay, let's do 10 or more. Oh, come on. I knew like 15. Seriously? Yeah, I guess I should have had you count as we were along. But, yeah, I was just surprised how many I knew, but, before we had the appliance business, when I was in high school, I worked at Fairway, and you kind of get used to every road check. You look at the name, and, I had that all memorized. I think that's how I knew Harry Beatty. I think he came to Fairway a lot. Does anyone have anything to add? Did anyone else have a connection with any of these students from this class? Arlene?
Nell Scott, I think he's related to, was related to my dad.
Okay.
He had a third wife, Leela Atkinson.
We did. Okay. Missed that one. Yeah. So really this class, it was pretty varied, the places that they lived. With, a lot of them stayed here. But thank you for coming.
Thank you.